Jeannie Seely was never the kind of woman who played by the rules. For decades, she stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, smiling under the spotlight, while battles raged behind the curtain. She carried secrets no one dared to speak, the kind that could tarnish the legacy of country music's most sacred hall. Now, at the end of her life, she decided the silence had gone on long enough. For the first time, she began to tell the truth about what really happened inside the Opry's walls. A small-town girl with big dreams. Marilyn Jean Seely was born on July 6, 1940, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, the youngest of 4 children to Irene and Leo Seely. Her father split his days between the farm and the Titusville steel mill, while her mother filled their small farmhouse with hymns and melodies. From an early age, Jeannie grew up surrounded by music. The family gathered around the radio every Saturday night to hear the Grand Ole Opry broadcasts, a ritual that planted a seed deep inside the little girl. At just 8 years old, she told anyone who would listen that she wanted to be on that stage one day. By age 11, she was already chasing that dream. She sang on Meadville's WMGW local radio station and later performed on a television show in Erie. But life in Townville wasn't easy. In high school, she was teased for being poor and for singing country music when everyone else was chasing rock and roll. Despite this, she graduated in 1958 as an honors student and worked as a secretary at the Titusville Trust Company. Yet the Pennsylvania winters weighed on her. One Easter, her car slid into the snow and got stuck, a moment that convinced her she needed to leave. By 1961, she packed her MGA Roadster convertible and drove west to California. She took a bank job in Beverly Hills, but her heart wasn't in it. She wanted music, not ledgers. Before long, she was working at Imperial Records as a secretary for half the pay, just to be closer to the business. At night, she sang on a TV show called Hollywood Jamboree and began writing songs. It was the start of a career that would eventually bring her to Nashville and into the shadows of the Opry itself. Breakthrough, fame, and the first cracks at the Opry. In California, Jeannie Seely began to carve her place as a songwriter before she was ever known as a singer. While still working at Imperial Records, she started writing for 4-Star Music. One of her earliest creations was "Anyone Who Knows What Love Is Will Understand," a song she co-wrote with a young Randy Newman. The track was picked up in 1964 by Irma Thomas, who turned it into a rhythm and blues hit. That same year, she co-wrote "Senses" with Glenn Campbell, which Connie Smith recorded, and "It Just Takes Practice," cut by Dottie West. Slowly, her songs began to filter into Nashville, even if her face wasn't there yet. Seely's own chance as a recording artist came when she signed with Challenge Records and recorded a handful of singles in Nashville. None of them made a big impact, but they put her voice on tape. And it was that voice, husky, emotional, and brimming with vulnerability, that songwriter Hank Cochran would remember when he heard her again years later. Cochran believed she had something special, but he warned her. If she really wanted a career, she had to leave California and move to Nashville. By 1965, she did exactly that. With encouragement from both Cochran and Dottie West, Seely packed her bags and drove south. Within months, she was performing as Norma Jean's replacement on Porter Wagoner's television show and attending the annual DJ convention. In one of those crowded hotel hallways, Cochran told her he had written a song that would change her life. He called it "Don't Touch Me." Released in 1966 on Monument Records, the song became a phenomenon. It reached number 2 on the country charts, crossed into the Hot 100, and even made the adult contemporary chart. Critics called it groundbreaking, a ballad of desire and restraint that allowed a woman to sing openly about longing. That same year, Jeannie Seely won the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. She was now one of Nashville's brightest new stars, but success did not shield her from resistance. When she debuted on the Opry stage in a miniskirt, Opry manager Ott Devine scolded her, saying it wasn't proper attire. Jeannie shot back with a deal. She wouldn't wear one backstage if he didn't let anyone wear one through the front door. Her confidence rattled the old guard, but her talent was undeniable. In 1967, she was officially invited to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. From the outside, it looked like a dream fulfilled. But behind the curtain, she was beginning to notice the shadows, the whispers, the cold shoulders, the small humiliations. She was too outspoken, too independent, too unwilling to bow her head. And in the years ahead, that would cost her dearly. The duets, the touring years, and the hidden costs. By the end of the 1960s, Jeannie Seely's star was secure, but the price of keeping it burning grew heavier. In 1969, she signed with Decca Records and began working with producer Owen Bradley. Her solo singles didn't climb as high as Don't Touch Me, but they kept her in rotation, and her voice, soulful, aching, and laced with grit, remained unmistakable. At the same time, she entered one of the most significant professional partnerships of her life, her duets with Jack Green. Their first release, Wish I Didn't Have to Miss You, became a top 5 hit, earning a Grammy nomination and cementing them as one of country's most beloved pairings. They toured relentlessly, filling arenas from Madison Square Garden to Wembley Arena in London. Fans adored their chemistry, but the schedule was grueling. For nearly a decade, Seely and Green performed as a package deal, their names linked together in headlines, interviews, and nominations for CMA Vocal Duo of the Year. Yet Jeannie never abandoned her solo work. Songs like Can I Sleep in Your Arms, 1973, and Lucky Ladies brought her back into the top 20, proving she could still command attention on her own. But the industry was shifting. Radio leaned toward newer voices, and female artists were still treated as second class. Promoters often booked Green without her, and she would later reflect that loyalty seemed to favor the man in the duo. Her personal life carried equal turmoil. She had married Hank Cochran in 1969, the same man who had given her the song that changed her career. Their home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, became a gathering place for writers and musicians. But the marriage grew strained. Hank's drinking and womanizing clashed with Jeannie's independence, and by the late 1970s, they were separated. The divorce became official in 1979. Then came the accident. In June 1977, while driving near Goodlettsville, Tennessee, her car veered off the road and slammed into a tree. The crash left her with a fractured jaw, broken ribs, and a punctured, collapsed lung. Surgeons operated immediately to save her life. Recovery was long and painful. Dottie West, her friend and fellow Opry star, drove her on car rides just to lift her spirits. Jeannie later admitted that surviving the wreck changed her perspective. It made her realize how fragile success and life itself could be. Secrets? Room 6B? And the silent struggle. The accident of 1977 left Jeannie Seely physically shaken. But it was another kind of wound that cut even deeper, one that had nothing to do with broken bones. In the early 1970s, she had been summoned to a place few performers ever mentioned aloud, Room 6B. It wasn't on any official Opry map, nor was it included in backstage tours. It was tucked down a shadowed hallway past costume storage, with nothing more than a brass knob on the door. Inside, she found one man, powerful and calculating, who didn't ask for her opinion. He delivered a warning. What he said has never been repeated word for word, but its effect was enough to leave her shaken. That same night, she walked to the parking lot, stripped off one of her favorite blue sequined dresses, and set it on fire. No one could explain why, but she never wore blue on stage again. After that, things began to change. Her set lists grew shorter. Her introductions were cut. Whispers followed her backstage about being difficult. A young male newcomer even replaced her one Saturday night when she was scheduled to host, despite his botched lines. Jeannie kept showing up, smiling for the crowd, but she began documenting what was happening. In letters typed on onion skin paper with her manual typewriter, she recorded the slights, the stage cues that changed at the last minute, the times her microphone mysteriously failed. Each letter was dated, signed, and tucked into a shoebox under her bed, wrapped in a red scarf her mother had given her. By the 1980s, as her career slowed and her marriage to Hank Cochran ended, Jeannie tried to rebuild. She toured with Willie Nelson, appeared in films like Honeysuckle Rose, opened her own Nashville nightclub in 1985, and even dabbled in acting with productions like The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. She was resilient, but the shadow of Room 6B lingered. In 1991, tragedy nearly erased her memories. A fire swept through her second home in the middle of the night. Most of the house was spared, but her bedroom burned. The shoebox of letters somehow survived, the scarf melted but the lock intact. Sitting on her porch after the blaze, Jeannie opened the box for the first time in years. Reading her own words felt like looking at someone else's life. One silenced, manipulated, erased. She whispered into the night, "I wasn't crazy." That moment became a turning point. She didn't destroy the letters. She decided to keep them safe, as proof. Through the 1990s, Jeannie returned to recording, releasing albums like her self-produced 1990 project and Life's Highway in 2003. She also kept acting, appearing in stage productions, and even performing in the Vagina monologues. On the surface, she was thriving again, but she carried the weight of secrets that only she and a handful of others could confirm. Every time she walked down the Opry's backstage hallways, she felt the echo of that closed door: survival, legacy, and breaking the silence. As the new millennium began, Jeannie Seely found herself both a survivor and a quiet witness. She had endured the highs of Grammy wins and Opry ovations, but also the humiliations of being sidelined and the scars of backstage battles. Still, she refused to disappear. In 2001, she contributed to Ralph Stanley's Clinch Mountain Sweethearts, and 2 years later released Life's Highway, which critics praised as timeless country. She played Louise Seeger in Always, Patsy Cline, and even stepped into film with Changing Hearts alongside Faye Dunaway. Every project carried her voice, that husky, smoke-stained tone critics once called Miss Country Soul. But life continued to test her resilience. In May 2010, Nashville was devastated by historic floods. Her cottage on the Cumberland River was swallowed by 3 feet of water. Jeannie and her husband, Nashville attorney Gene Ward, escaped in a pickup truck, leaving nearly everything behind. The house was gutted, her possessions ruined, but she went back to work almost immediately. Standing on the Opry stage after losing her home, she told the crowd, "You can either laugh about it or you can cry, and I don't feel like crying." It was the philosophy that had carried her since Room 6B. That same year, she quietly married Ward, a man who gave her stability after decades of storm. Together, they shared cruises, shows, and a renewal of vows in 2019. But Jeannie never stopped performing. She released Vintage Country, Old But Treasured in 2011, an affectionate nod to the music she loved. In 2016, she began hosting the annual Dottie West Birthday Bash, raising money for the Nashville Musicians Relief Fund. By 2017, she had spent 50 years as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. Few women could claim such a milestone, and she stood alongside legends like Loretta Lynn and Dolly Parton. The same year, she released Written in Song, revisiting her own compositions once recorded by others. Critics gave it glowing reviews, proof that her voice and her pen still mattered. In 2018, she was honored with a star on the Music City Walk of Fame, and the following year, she received an honorary doctorate from Lincoln Memorial University. For all the struggles, she had built a legacy impossible to erase. The final years, the letters resurface, and the last goodbye. As Jeannie Seely entered her 80s, she did not fade quietly into retirement. In 2020, just after her 81st birthday, she released an American classic on Curb Records, with guest appearances from Willie Nelson, Rhonda Vincent, and Steve Weriner. Critics praised it as proof that her artistry still carried weight. 4 years later, in 2024, she returned to RCA Studio B to record her own version of Dottie West's Suffer Time, a song she had once performed on the Opry. For Jeannie, it was a way of keeping the memory of her late friend alive. But beneath the music, the shadows from her past resurfaced. A young researcher working on a thesis about forgotten women in country music showed up at her door one evening, carrying a folder with a photocopy of one of her long-hidden letters from 1971. It detailed her second summons to Room 6B, complete with names, threats, and a warning that if she ever spoke again, she would be silenced before finishing her next verse. The researcher had found the letter misfiled in the Opry archives. For Jeannie, it was a chilling reminder that her secrets had not disappeared. They had only been waiting. That year, her husband, Gene Ward, was battling cancer. He died in December 2024, leaving Jeannie widowed for the second time in her life. Months later, her own health began to fail. She endured multiple back surgeries, 2 emergency abdominal operations, 11 days in intensive care, and a fight with pneumonia. In July 2025, she was hospitalized once more, this time unable to recover. On August 1, 2025, Jeannie Seely died of complications from an intestinal infection at the age of 85. Her family arranged for a public memorial at the Grand Ole Opry House on August 14th. Fittingly, it was called Jeannie Seely's 5,389th Opry show, the exact number of times she had stood on that stage. Fans who couldn't attend tuned in by radio or live stream, hearing tributes to a woman who had fought for her place in country music and never let it be erased. Instead of flowers, donations were made to the Opry Trust Fund, ensuring her final act was one of giving back. Though frail in her last months, she remained sharp. She told interviewers she never retired. She just stopped doing what felt like work. To the end, she insisted she had been blessed, but those who knew her story understood the cost of that blessing. The letters, now entrusted to an archive beyond Opry control, ensure her truth cannot be buried. Jeannie Seely's voice may have been silenced by time, but her story, raw and unflinching, continues to echo in the rafters of the Opry she both loved and feared. Jeannie Seely's life was a mix of triumph, heartbreak, and survival. She broke barriers, carried scars, and left behind a legacy no one can erase. What do you remember most about her remarkable journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of the legends who shaped music history.